Story 1. Background. So, for our honeymoon, we went across a number of European cities by train. The traveling was magical. We did 2 of the legs on sleepers, and enjoyed the traveling as much as the destinations. We have got into a routine of sightseeing in the morning, having a lunch somewhere fabulous, going back to our hotel for a little lie down in heat of the afternoon, then out for more sightseeing, evening meal somewhere else fabulous, going for a walk in the evening, having an ice cream, another stroll, then sit in a pavement cafe and have a drink and watch the sunset. Fabulous 2 weeks. Some of the cities that we visited were very touristy, but some we thought might be a little quieter. What we couldn't do was get away from the British entitled people, especially the entitled parents. Story. So, we are in Salzburg, and I am trying to eat my own weight in Mozart Kugel each day. Hubby is trying to eat his body weight in ice cream and cake. We are doing well. It's day 2, and we are working our way around the restaurants. We've eaten at the monastery where they brew the beer on our first night, so we decided that we fancy eating in one of the main squares at a very nice-looking restaurant. The evening is warm, but there is a gentle breeze and the evening is bright. It's only about 6 p.m., and there are few people outside the restaurant finishing their late lunches, early teas. We wait to be seated and are happily looking through our menus. Joy of joy, there is a dessert where they serve you both ice cream and the Mozart liqueur, which tastes of Mozart Kugels too. This way both hubby and I can continue with our mission. The waitress brings out our drinks, and we settle down to enjoy the view in the evening and wait for our starters. And then, this group of 4 couples in assorted pushchairs and small children descend. They are screeching and cooing and generally making a noise. Hubby and I look at each other and shrug, sure that the noise will settle down once they are seated. We were wrong. They started to move all the tables around. Not a case of just putting a couple of tables together. No, they are dragging them around and making one big table in the middle of the outside seating. Apart from the scraping noise, they are shouting at each other as to how they should be arranged. And this is when we realize that these are middle-class Brits abroad, some of the most entitled idiots on the planet. The waitress comes steaming out of the restaurant shouting in German. This has absolutely no effect, as these are Brits who will only respond to English, and even then it's unlikely they will do what you say. One of the women, the entitled woman, turns to the waitress. Can't understand you. Waitress, stop moving the tables. The entitled woman, in a whiny voice, we are all together, so we are just moving the tables to where we want them. Stop now. The tables are layout for the best service, health and safety. We want them here. The entitled woman and her friends start to sit down at the momentous table they've just created and use their pushchairs to block every exit from the outdoor seating area. Waitress, if you put the tables there, we cannot serve the other diners. The tables are laid out for our customers' and waiters' convenience. You moving them make it impossible for us to serve some people. Just take our drink orders. We aren't eating. No, please put the tables back. Just take our orders. No, leave now. We will not be serving you. The entitled woman starts to blister, but you can see that the husbands in the group are starting to get embarrassed. The mums are regrouping to take on the waitress, but the husbands are not having it. They bundle the women and kids up and start to move the tables back, apologizing to the waitress. About 10 minutes after they leave, the waitress comes out with our appetizers. Waitress, I'm so sorry about that. You should not have been inconvenienced like that. We need to be able to get to you if you need anything. Hubby tells her it's nothing and thanks her for her thoughtfulness. Her service was perfection, and we left a very generous tip. Story 2. This happened a few semesters ago when I was taking a course in urban design. Everyone was grouped into teams of 3, but one of my group members wanted to join another group with their friend. This left me with just one partner. I'm not sure why the professor thought this was acceptable, but I wasn't too worried since I was fairly confident in my ability to handle the work. The course integrated previous studio lessons into a comprehensive topic covering urban planning. This included architectural design, environmental sustainability, urban infrastructure, and historic preservation. I tried brainstorming with my partner about the direction our project should take. My initial idea was to focus on residential housing, as it would address a significant demand here in New York City. However, my partner seemed fixated on making the project about industrial buildings, so I pivoted to that. We brainstormed different ideas, but I got the distinct impression that he wanted me to take the lead. He mostly agreed with my suggestions, but offered very little input. Weeks went by, and I regularly updated him on my progress through messages, often via WhatsApp. Unfortunately, I rarely received updates or feedback from him in return. It irritated me a bit, but I remained confident in my work. I figured it would be enough to carry us through the next checkpoint and presentation. Midway through the semester, I experienced a horrible kidney stone. It wasn't caused by junk food or a poor diet, quite the opposite. It resulted from eating too many black beans and chickpeas. As a side note, I had asked Chad for a healthy dinner plan that fit my dietary goals. The suggestions helped me craft a meal plan that met my nutritional needs. While it did make me feel better overall, it inadvertently led to the worst kidney stone of my life. The pain was excruciating, and I ended up in the emergency room. I was put on various pain medications and had to stay there for several nights. But that wasn't the worst of it. The stone was so large that it got stuck, requiring surgery to insert a stent. Do yourself a favor and don't Google how they insert it. It's still haunting. For weeks, I endured constant pain, urinating blood, and then had to undergo yet another surgery to remove the stent. It was a grueling process, but I finally recovered. Throughout this ordeal, I still managed to work on the project. However, I was shocked to discover that my partner had done absolutely nothing during that time. To make matters worse, I learned that he had tried to present my work as his own. How can someone behave like that? I decided to email the professor to explain the situation. I outlined how I had done all the work and provided screenshots of our chat history as well as the project files, which included all the edit logs. The professor reminded me that for the final submission, we were required to add our initials to the slides we worked on. I made a note of it and moved on. When I finally recovered and was ready to present, I intentionally left the initials off the slides for the presentation itself since it wasn't mandatory at that stage. I wanted to see how my partner would handle it. Despite everything, I even tried to be considerate. I gave him talking points and allowed him to claim specific sections as his own, even though I had done all the work on those parts. Yet, during the presentation, he kept interrupting me, attempting to present my work as if he had contributed anything substantial. His contributions were mostly repetitive and added no value. The judges, composed of local professionals in senior roles within the urban design industry, quickly picked up on this. Their questions and comments were almost entirely directed at me. Since I had an in-depth understanding of every detail, I could confidently address their inquiries. It became clear who had done the bulk of the work. Finally, the last day for submitting our work arrived. I included my initials on every single slide. I worked on essentially all of them. My partner, apparently unaware of this requirement, submitted an outdated version of the project without any initials. A few weeks later, I reached out to him to ask about his grade. He mentioned that he had passed with a C+, which surprised me. When I shared that I had received an F, he seemed annoyed and said he would speak to the professor to contest his grade. I couldn't believe it. Some people truly lack self-awareness. In the end, I followed all the professor's instructions and managed to navigate a tough semester. Despite the setbacks, I came out of it with a solid grade and an unforgettable experience. Oh, and I also experienced morphine for the first time during my hospital visit. Quite the semester, right? Story 3. Cast, me, entitled Coworker, Libby, also known as the Tick, the Eye of Sauron, and Conan the Grammarian. My friends, Chad and Kevin, changed. Tick had a well-deserved reputation as a toxic person. She would painstakingly script any interaction with another person so that she was up here and you were down there. Her rules were, she speaks, you listen. She teaches, you learn. She tells, you obey. Mind you, she was a coworker, not a supervisor. A little bit of background. Tick had been a counselor for new employees at one point, which was a really bad idea. Our organization has a bad habit of finding the worst, most insecure person for a position and putting them in there. She was known to try and win the trust of new employees, and then use what they told her against them in an effort to get them fired over trivial things. She would also watch the new employees to find any minor infraction and also try to get them fired. This is where she gained the nickname of the Eye of Sauron. After 2 sessions, the supervisor told her that she was no longer welcome. The supervisor was a down-to-earth, true gentleman with infinite patience. He was my counselor when I was new. I ran into him one day after this, and he told me that she was a piece of human excrement. Coming from a man of that much patience, that said a lot. In our office, Tick would watch all of the other employees like a hawk. If she saw some minor infraction, she would run to the boss office, glance back at everyone and flick her hand, saying loudly, "There is a problem with another employee." She would then go in and close the door. Afterwards, some poor schmuck would suffer an evil fate. She literally dined people out for a 16-minute coffee break and a 46-minute lunch. She dined out one guy for having sand in the company vehicle, but he lived on the beach and had to walk over sand to get to the car. We were all horrified that the supervisor even gave her the time of day. It was so disruptive, and Tick loved the power. So, some genius supervisor decided to put her in charge of a whole section of paperwork. Not a supervisor, but just the person to ensure formatting and correct procedure. She began kicking back paperwork for 3 spaces after a period, 2 spaces after a comma, telling you to change puppy to little dog. It was her way of making you bow to her greatness. In spite of all the complaints, no one could get rid of her, and she was dug in like a tick. I had rebuffed her attempts to make me her flunky. One time, she demanded I stop working on my project because I would be working for her from now on. I was to be her baby employee and carry her things and help her format her paperwork. I had been in for 7 years and stopped her cold, so I was on the naughty list. So, she battered me for 2 years on my paperwork, throwing me under the bus every chance she got, and the supervisor always took her side. I showed the supervisor some of my paperwork and said that Libby was right, half the time. I was right, half the time, and yet she took Tick's side 100%. And the corrections were so trivial. So, one day, Tick throws my paperwork on my desk and berates me. "Tick, your paperwork is always so messed up. I'm going to read everything you send me." Spelling and grammar were not her job to fix. Her job was to ensure proper procedure. Me. "Oh, thank you, Libby." She was taken aback. From then on, I would type out forms and wait until Friday at 4 p.m. and toss a stack of paperwork on her desk and say, "Thanks so much, Libby. Boss needs this by 8 a.m. Monday morning. You have a great night." Then, I got a collateral duty that put me in charge of a mandatory training that most employees had to complete, including her. She was very bad at this particular function, so I told her, "You wanted to play this game, let's play this game." I would stand behind her whenever she had to complete this function, which was once a quarter and was very physical. Like her with my paperwork, I would stand behind her and say, "No, no, no, what are you doing? Don't you know how to do this? This is far more important than grammar. You should get this by now." Often, she was the only one to fail this function, so when that happened, I would get on the public announcer and declare, "All those who have failed this function, report to me immediately." I would walk up to the supervisor's door and wave my hand and say, "There is a problem with an employee," and I would go in and close the door. Amazingly, she stopped harassing me, but the list of victims was still long. Tick soon ran afoul of a friend of mine, Chad, who had been getting the same treatment. Chad went to the big boss as Tick was holding up a major project. Tick was called in to explain, and she became unglued, screaming at the big boss. An all-office email came out within 10 minutes, saying that Tick had been immediately removed from her position, which was given to Kevin. Kevin had previously endured Tick for 2 years as her baby employee, having been treated like dirt. He was another as nice as could be guy and was ground into dust by her. Kevin got an award for turning the position around, and during the award ceremony, Chad and I went up to Kevin. Tick was nearby, buttering a bagel. Chad and I told Kevin that he was the best person in that position, and that we were so grateful, and that he totally turned that disaster around. Tick dropped her bagel on the ground and fled. She retired the next day, and we held a party where we played the scene where Sauron's eye comes crashing down as she leaves the building. Story 4. This happened on October 1st, the morning of my daughter's wedding. If I hadn't been in such a hurry to get to the venue, things might have turned out differently. But I'll never know. I had stopped at the store to buy distilled water for the steamer we needed to prepare her dress and the bridesmaids' dresses. Time was critical. I was patiently waiting in line behind an elderly couple who were finishing their transaction. The woman was standing in front of the card payment terminal, with their shopping cart beside her. Her husband was at the end of the cart, bagging their groceries. The cashier offered to bag their items, but the husband cheerfully replied that he had done it for years as part of his job and didn't mind. His wife chuckled and said he liked helping out. I had my debit card ready in my hand and smiled as I joined their friendly conversation. I tend to gesture a lot when I talk, so as we chatted, I was waving my right hand in the air. My hand was clearly visible the whole time. Out of nowhere, I was shoved hard from behind. The force pushed me into the elderly woman, who then stumbled forward and shoved the cart into her husband. My first thought was that someone must have tripped and fallen into me. Regaining my balance, I turned around to see an elderly man with wild, unkempt hair and a mask hanging below his nose. He was glaring at me while slamming his groceries onto the conveyor belt. He spoke before I could process what had just happened. "Why did you push me?" I asked, shocked. "I shoved you because you shoved her," he barked back. "And I'm not going to let you shove me too, so I beat you to it. Ha!" He was practically yelling and pulled his mask down to lean closer to my face. "You fool!" I could feel my face heating up, my skin tingling with a mix of pain and anger. Confrontation makes me uncomfortable, and on top of that, my shoulder was throbbing. I have fibromyalgia, so even a small amount of pressure can be excruciating. Meanwhile, the elderly couple in front of me quickly left the store. I didn't even get the chance to apologize for what had happened. "I didn't touch her," I protested, trying to keep my voice steady. The cashier, however, remained silent, quietly ringing up my gallon of distilled water. The man wasn't done. "I saw you shove her," he insisted, now pointing at my water. "And what's this? Ever heard of a faucet? You people today are ridiculous. Buying fancy water when you could drink out of a hose. You're the problem with the world." His words grew louder and nastier, but I stopped registering what he was saying. It felt like I had gone into mild shock. I just wanted to scream at him, to explain why I was buying distilled water, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Why did I even need to justify my purchase to this man? I robotically swiped my debit card, all the while repeating in my head, "I have to get to my daughter. She's getting married today. I need to get to her. She's waiting." I grabbed my water and made a quick exit. As I walked away, I heard him direct his hostility toward the cashier. "Where did you get that shirt? It's awful. I've seen better shirts in the garbage. Do you know how silly you look?" The cashier calmly replied, "I like this shirt. I'm ready for Halloween." It was a black shirt with a skeleton design on the front. She didn't engage with his rude comments further, even as he continued to rant. At that moment, I realized this man was likely disturbed or dealing with some mental issues. But still, all I wanted was to reach my car. My emotions were overwhelming. I was angry, hurt, and on the verge of tears. Once I got to my car, I locked the doors and began shaking uncontrollably. Then, I burst into tears. For about 5 minutes, I couldn't stop crying or trembling. That's when the reality hit me. I had been assaulted. He shoved me. He hurt me, and I did nothing. I froze. I felt victimized in a way I couldn't fully describe. It was just a shove, but the violation of my space and safety shook me to my core. I couldn't imagine how women recover from far more violent assaults. My respect for survivors grew immensely in that moment. My shoulder burned with pain, and I couldn't stop replaying the incident in my head. Not a single store employee had stepped in to defend me or address the man's behavior. I drove to my daughter's venue, still in a daze. After the wedding, hours later, I was in the shower when my husband walked in. He noticed a large bruise on my left shoulder, about the size of a tennis ball. "What happened?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I hesitated for a moment, but then explained everything to him. As I recounted the story, I could see his face shift from worry to fury. My husband, a gentle giant by nature, was livid. "If I had been there," he began, clenching his fists. "I know," I interrupted. "But if you'd been there, we might have ended up dealing with the police, and that's not what we needed on her wedding day." Even though I was grateful he wasn't there, part of me wished anyone had stood up for me in that store. I kept replaying the incident, imagining all the ways I could have responded differently. I wish I had stood my ground. I wish I had defended myself. I wish the cashier had called security or even just asked the man to calm down. But instead, I had shut down completely, retreating into myself. To this day, the memory lingers. I think about it often, not just because of the pain, but because of the way it left me feeling powerless. However, that experience also gave me a deeper appreciation for the strength it takes to recover from trauma. To anyone who has survived an assault of any kind, you are brave. You matter. What happened to you was not your fault, and you didn't deserve it. You are a survivor. What I experienced was only a shove, but it left a lasting impact. I can only imagine the resilience it takes to overcome something far more severe, and for that, my admiration knows no bounds. Story 5. It's currently 4 a.m. as I'm typing this, and I can't believe I'm writing this down because the whole situation is genuinely unbelievable. Before we dive in, let me just add the usual disclaimer. English is not my first language, so please bear with me. Alright, so I 19-year-old female am the older sister to a well-meaning, but occasionally clueless kid, my 16-year-old brother, who we'll call Jake for the sake of the story. Today, Jake was supposed to attend a party at a friend's house. It might have been a birthday party, though I'm not entirely sure. The plan was for Jake to sleep over after the party. As you can imagine, kids can sometimes make questionable decisions, and several of them at the party, including Jake's friend, were drinking. Apparently, the birthday boy drank so much that he passed out. That part is important, but not the main focus here. The situation took a turn when someone's mother showed up to pick up her child. This particular mom is the entitled person in this story, so let's call her Karen. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. Karen arrived around 3:30 am to collect her kid and saw Jake and his friends still at the house. Now, this timing is relevant because 3:30 am is way past curfew for most of us. Karen wasn't happy to see them still there, and the following conversation ensued, translated from Spanish and pieced together from what my frantic little brother managed to explain to me. "Karen, what are you all still doing here? It's so late." Jake, "Hi, Auntie Karen, we're all supposed to sleep over." Karen, "Well, it's late. You all should head home." Friend 1, "Auntie, we can't. Our parents are asleep, and we have permission to be here." Friend 2, "Yeah, my mom would probably freak out if I came home this late." Karen, "The birthday boy is asleep. You can't stay here if he's asleep. You all have to leave." Jake, "It's fine, Auntie. Our parents said we could stay over." Karen, "No, I'm the adult here, and you need to listen to me. I won't leave until all of you go home. Did I make myself clear?" Jake, "Yes, Auntie." At this point, Jake and his friends were effectively kicked out of the house by Karen, who decided she had the authority to do so. They all started making plans to leave. Jake wasn't too worried about himself, even though he didn't have house keys on him. Our dad is a light sleeper and is often awake at odd hours, so Jake assumed he'd be able to get inside once he got home. He also had access to the car keys, so getting home wasn't an issue until Karen intervened again. As Jake was getting into the car, Karen appeared and confronted him. "Karen, young man, what do you think you're doing?" Jake, "Hey, Auntie, I'm driving home." Karen, "Absolutely not. You're all clearly under the influence, and you cannot drive. I'm the adult here, and you have to listen to me." Now, for the record, my brother was entirely sober. Some of his friends might not have been, but he definitely was. Jake tried reasoning with Karen, but she wouldn't budge. Eventually, he gave up arguing and arranged to get a ride home with another friend who had also been kicked out. A similar exchange happened between Karen and the friend, with her accusing them of being in no condition to drive and insisting they listen to her because she was an adult. Somehow, despite all this, my brother managed to get home safely. When Jake got home, he realized there was another problem. Although he could manually open the front gate since it was broken at the time, the front door was locked, and Dad was most likely asleep. This was unusual, given Dad's habit of staying up late, but he had just returned from a Christmas party and was probably exhausted. Jake decided to call Mom for help. She's a light sleeper, which he thought would work in his favor. Unfortunately, she didn't answer. Next, he tried Dad, but no luck there either. At this point, Jake started to panic. His phone battery was running low, he didn't know the number for the landline, and he was running out of options. That's when he noticed my bedroom light was still on. He called me. "Jake, Ash, are you awake?" Me, "Yeah, what's going on?" "Jake, I need you to open the door. It's locked." Me thinking he had the car and not fully grasping the situation. "Oh, yeah, the gate is broken. You have to open it manually." "Wait, why are you coming home so late? Dad's going to be mad." Jake, "No, Ash, you don't understand. The door is locked. Just open it, please. I'll explain everything." Me still confused. "Wait, we can lock the gate." "How?" Jake, "No, the gate isn't locked. The door is locked, and I don't have keys. The alarm system is on, so I can't get inside. Can you disable it and let me in?" Me, "All right, but if Mom or Dad wakes up and they're mad, this is all on you." I went downstairs, still half asleep and utterly baffled. Jake had never come home this late before. Our curfew is usually 2 o'clock or 2:30 am at the latest, and it was nearly 4 am by this point. Dad usually waits up for us, so the whole situation was strange. Once Jake was inside, he quickly explained what had happened with Karen and the party. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I've dealt with my share of overbearing adults, but this was a new level of absurdity. Honestly, I'm exhausted with people like Karen who think they have the right to interfere in situations that don't concern them. I've had my own experiences with this kind of behavior, and it's frustrating every time. I'll post an update if anything else happens tomorrow, but for now, I desperately need some sleep. Good night, everyone. Story 6. I always thought these crazy people who don't mind their own business must be a rare breed, and that I would never encounter one of them, but somehow I did. So a little bit of background before I start. I was born in Pakistan, but came to Canada when I was 3. But by that time, I could already speak in Urdu, Punjabi and Hindi. The languages are fairly similar in many regards, and then I came to Canada and English was my 4th language. As I grew up, I also learned Arabic, French and Japanese to varying competencies, but all within the realm of conversational. Having grown up in Canada, I have no accent when I speak in English, so you wouldn't be able to tell me apart from a Caucasian person if you spoke with me over the phone. But also having learned so many languages, I'm able to pronounce a lot of sounds fairly accurately, so I sound authentic in all languages that I speak to all but native speakers. Most of the languages that I know sound different enough from each other that someone that doesn't know them can still tell that the language is different. I've traveled back home to Pakistan a few times, and I would always encounter those beggars who come with elaborate stories. Like, my wife is sick and she needs surgery, and I managed to get money for that. but I need money for the flight to reach her, etc. I came up with a fun counter to that, which was that I would act like I didn't understand them at all and would start speaking in a different language that they wouldn't know. Japanese was my go-to language while in Pakistan. The reaction those people would have was quite hilarious. As per apparently new rules, instead of acronyms, I'll use fake names. I'll keep them all 5-letter names so the columns line up decently enough. So anyway, on to my story now. The cast. Karen, the star of the show. Jimmy, Karen's husband, and a decent human being. Zaraf, me. Wifey, my wife. Singh, restaurant manager. So my wife and I were at an Indian restaurant in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, enjoying our dinner and having a conversation. We speak in a mix of Urdu and English, just mixing with whatever feels easy. To someone listening in, they would be able to understand enough to figure out what we are talking about in most cases. We were sitting at a booth table, so it was only open from one side. Karen and her family, Jimmy and her 2 daughters that looked like they were in their early teens, were sitting at an open table with an empty table between us. My wife is Pakistani like me, and what some Pakistanis like to do is eat rice with their hands. I prefer a spoon myself, but at this time my wife was eating with her hands. Apparently this Karen got offended at seeing my wife eat with her hands. When she came over, I started speaking in different languages, acting like I didn't understand what she was saying in English. I'll translate what I said and put in parentheses which language I said it in. Here's how it went. Karen walks over to our table with a sour expression on her face. Jimmy calls to her, telling her to sit back down and leave us alone, but she ignores him. She addresses my wife directly. Karen, what's wrong with you? Can't you eat your food in a civilized manner like the rest of us? Zaraf in Urdu. Ha, what do you want? Can't you see we're eating? Karen looks at me with surprise. Karen, what did you just say? I say to my wife in Urdu, don't talk to her in English, just do what I'm doing. And then I say to Karen, you're just a crazy woman, go sit back down. Why aren't you speaking in English? My wife starts smiling, and I try hard to keep a straight face. Wifey, we are just enjoying our meal. Why don't you go and sit down? Karen, I just heard you speaking in English. I know you can talk in English. Yeah, I can, but I choose to not do so. My wife says to me, I think she's getting upset. And I reply, I know, that's what makes this so much fun. Karen, stop it. Talk in English like I heard you before. Zaraf in Japanese, so you were listening in on our conversation. Don't you have any manners? Karen, wait, that's some other language now. What the hell is this? Jimmy, leave them alone, Karen. They don't speak English. I know they do. They're just pretending not to. It doesn't matter, just sit down. I start waving toward her table. That's right, go back to your table, you loud cow. Jimmy, Karen, they aren't doing anything wrong. Leave them alone. Karen, she's eating with her hands. I can't let the girls learn her uncivilized ways. I say to my wife, in Hindi, start licking your fingers. My wife starts licking the rice on her right hand off the top parts of her fingers, and that makes Karen rage even more. Karen, oh my God, look at how gross she is being. Jimmy, stop looking at her if you don't like it then. Then I say in Arabic, hey you dumb witch, do you behave this way everywhere you go? Karen, he changed languages again. I know he did. His accent changed. I then reply in Japanese, yep, and I can keep changing. Karen, speak in English. Jimmy, you must have heard them wrong. They don't know English. Leave them alone. Then why are they living here? They don't deserve to live here if they don't know English. I was having a hard time keeping a straight face, so I disguised it by raising my voice and appearing angry. I gestured towards her and then pointed at her table. I say in Arabic, are you so dumb you can't even listen to your husband? Go sit down and stop embarrassing yourself. Karen, you don't deserve to be here. Get out. At this point, the restaurant's manager Singh shows up to see what all the commotion was about. He's an Indian guy with a pretty heavy accent when he speaks in English, so I knew he'd speak either Hindi or Punjabi. Singh, excuse me, can you please keep your voice down? What is going on here? Karen, this woman is eating with her hands, and it's disgusting. She's corrupting my children with her barbaric ways. Singh, ma'am, there are no rules that forbid her from eating with her hands. Please leave them alone, or I'll have to ask you to leave. Now Jimmy gets up and comes over to where Karen is. Jimmy, sit down, Karen. You've embarrassed yourself enough. This is why I can't take you anywhere. I say in Punjabi, ignore this dumb cow. Her brain is smaller than a laddu, an Indian sweet. The manager starts laughing at my comment, and Karen gets even redder in the face since she probably thinks we're making fun of her. Karen, all of you should go back to your country. Jimmy just takes her arm and leads her back to their table and sits her down, telling her to shut up. Her daughters look like they want to sink into the floor from embarrassment. I ramble a few more sentences in varying languages as a kind of venting before my wife tells me to just leave it alone. We finished our dinner about 10 minutes later, with Karen glaring at us the whole time. I go pay the bill, and as we are walking out of the restaurant, we pass near Karen's table. I call out to Jimmy in perfect English, with no accent, while smiling, and I give him a wave. Hey buddy, I hope you enjoy your dinner. Have a good night. Karen's eyes bulge as she screams. Karen, I knew it. See? They know English. She tried to stand up suddenly, but instead ended up falling over backwards in her seat. My wife and I left the restaurant laughing before she could do anything else.